Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our timely discussion on research impacts to address chemical and biological threats. I am Kim Robinson. I serve as the Communications and Partnership Engagement Chief at the DHS Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office and will be the moderator for today's conversation. Our talk today is part of Series 2 of our DHS Science and Technology Whole of Government R&D Showcase on building resilience and innovation equity. Before we get started, let me share some context. Research into the agents and ways the American public could be exposed to chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear hazards is critical to the prevention of and preparation for emergency response against both natural events and intentional incidents. In the face of current and future threats, DHS works across the U.S. government research enterprise to develop solutions to characterize and mitigate risks and improve decision-making for leaders. Over these next few minutes, we want you to better understand how whole of government researchers are providing federal, tribal, state, and local officials timely guidance, tools, and technologies to save lives and keep communities safe. Let's get going. It's an honor to introduce our panel. Rachel Gooding, Chief Scientist, Department of Homeland Security, Chemical Security Analysis Center. Dr. Lloyd Huff, Scientific Advisor and Lead of the Hazard Awareness and Characterization Technology Center, U.S. Department of Homeland Security Science and Technology Directorate. Dr. Sang-Don Lee, Principal Associate National Program Director for Homeland Security Research Program, Office of Research and Development, United States Environmental Protection Agency. And Dr. Herbert Wolf, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Health Security, U.S. Department of Homeland Security Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office. Thank you all for being here. Herb, as a customer, what are your needs? Where do you turn to the research community for help?
Thanks, Kim. So as the principal advisor to the Secretary and Departmental Leadership on health and medical issues, we have an important role to play in the health security of the homeland, protecting our workforce and enabling our state and local partners. We rely heavily on the great work from the research community to enable us to do our mission. A few examples. We leverage the research community's probabilistic analysis of threat hazards, and that includes exposure estimates to help us inform acquisition estimates by our partners at Health and Human Services in support of national medical countermeasures, both from our needs and our priorities. We here at DHS play a critical role in Project BioShield, and by doing so, we issue material threat determinations. We'd not be able to do the work behind issuing those threat determinations without the great work of our research partners. Another area, since we are still emerging from the global pandemic, is for COVID-19. The research community provided us some invaluable work related to SARS-CoV-2 infectious dose studies. They also did some testing of the global SARS-CoV-2 variants against the medical countermeasures that we have. And they did that work by leveraging the classified life science capabilities that they have. They also helped us with some environmental stability work, which including help evaluate disinfectants to help both us inform our state and local partners, as well as keep the federal workforce safe here within DHS. Lastly, the research community assisted us in informing our frontline mission critical staff on the safe and acceptable ways to reuse personal protective equipment, which was very limited in the early days of the pandemic. I could really go on and on about the important work the research community does to allow the public health and medical community to keep our employees and the nation safer using novel approaches and science as the foundation. Thanks.
Thanks, Herb. So Lloyd, beyond CWMD, who are your core customers and what are their needs in preventing an event from occurring? And can you also speak to requirements and what is needed to respond effectively to an event?
DHS S&T serves a wide variety of DHS customers, including Customs and Border Patrol, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, FEMA, TSA, and others. And we share what we learn and know with our other partners across the federal government as well. And they all need to know, because there are so many threats across the chemical and biological space, that they all need to know which ones to focus on. There are so many threats to address that we need to prioritize and focus. And we do that by going through and logically and systematically filtering the vast landscape of threats and hazards down to the ones that are what we call high risk, those most important agents that have the greatest impact on the homeland. And once we've identified those, we begin to figure out what we need to know and what we need to know to prepare for, to respond to, and to recover from those events should they ever happen. And we do that through a variety of mechanisms.
Great, thanks. And Rachel, can you provide us some additional brief insights or examples?
Sure. Thanks, Kim, and thanks, Lloyd. In addition to characterizing the chemical and biological threats in the laboratory for toxicity and stability and other properties, DHS S&T has also developed a number of modeling tools to assess the impact of these materials in operational scenarios, such as contamination of the food and water supplies, as well as release in public spaces, both indoor and outdoor. The analysis provides an estimate of the quantity of material which could result in a catastrophic event, the factors which influence how bad the event might be, and the timelines and resources needed for a meaningful response. Collectively, these analyses can inform screening protocols, mitigation strategies, and detection approaches. Rounding out laboratory characterization and modeling, DHS S&T has conducted field trials to understand what happens during a release at scale in the real world under real conditions. Thanks, Kim. Back to you.
Great, thank you. And Sang-Don, same question. Do you have any additional insights or examples?
Okay, thanks, Kim. Sure. EPA's mission is to protect human health and environment. EPA's Homeland Security Research Program provides the information and the tools to enhance EPA's capabilities and those of our state, tribal, and local partners to respond to and recover from environmental contamination incidents. Our core customers are the agency responders and state, tribal, and local responders and their decision makers. Over the last 20 years, EPA researchers have built a foundation of science to develop capabilities to support rapid and flexible response to chemical, biological, and radiological incidents. EPA program started the research on anthrax as a biological threat following 9/11, and we were able to build on that foundation to address the pressing issues presented by the COVID-19 pandemic, including how to treat surfaces and aerosols so that we can reduce the risk of exposure in public settings such as mass transit. Back to you, Kim.
Oh, that was great. So picking up on those themes, let's turn to research results and how your work helps stakeholders face current and emerging hazards. Lloyd, knowing threats are evolving, how do you prioritize research investments and communicate these changes into the larger U.S. government research community?
So DHS S&T has a program that we call Panther, or Probabilistic Assessment of National Threats, Hazards, and Risks. And this program integrates our risk assessment capabilities and our laboratory characterization capabilities so that we can evaluate those risks and what we think we know about them. And then we can use the laboratory to evaluate those things that we don't know very well. And we take those things and we pull them together, and that helps us identify those, identify more information to understand those risks. And then we go through a process where we evaluate we develop what's called a master question list. We developed a master question list for SARS-CoV-2. We now have one for African swine fever. And these master question lists define what we know and what we need to know to respond to an event. And we use that to prioritize the research that we need to then go through in the laboratory. And when we're done with that, then we communicate our results through a variety of means that include intra-agency working group meetings, direct to customer requests, and to also publish them in scientific journals when it's possible.
Rachel, can you give us the CSAC?
Yes, thank you, Kim. And as Lloyd said, one of the primary strategic ways in which we help our stakeholders is by prioritizing threats specific to their mission areas, developing data to allow those threats to be understood, and developing the framework to anticipate future threats to start to plan for them now. The work needed to understand the properties of a toxic chemical can take years. The research investments that DHS S&T makes ensure that we can be ready for the next threat. If you don't have this, you're always preparing for the last attack. Specific examples of where we've helped stakeholders include the large-scale field trials I mentioned earlier that evaluate the function of emergency vehicles in a toxic cloud, as well as additional hazards that are created between that toxic plume and the environment, and the fundamental physical phenomena to better plan for the response and the mitigation. We've developed tools to evaluate vulnerable contamination points in the food processing plants to better focus security and detection measures. We've developed priority list of challenge materials to ensure that respirator masks are evaluated for the appropriate new threat materials. We developed screening recommendations for emerging threats for the aviation sector. We collect and maintain the largest repository of data for non-traditional agents so that we are ready to respond for a Salisbury-like incident in the US. We also have tools to evaluate chemicals and their potential for inclusion in a hazardous production process. So we have better evaluation tools for border and nail screening. Additionally, we have a 24/7 reach back capability as well as daily chemical news reports. So we are monitoring trends in this arena as well as providing the technical subject matter expertise context to evaluate those new threats. Back to you, Kim.
Great, thank you. So Sang-Don, what are some of the EPA R&D impacts which have helped frontline responders in tribal, state, and local governments?
That's a very good question, Kim. Our researchers in EPA provide the tools and information to the frontline responders, whether they are federal, state, tribal, or local, so they can timely and effectively respond to any incidents. We look at challenges like, where does the contamination go? How do we identify the contaminated area so we can inform public health decisions? How can we improve our capabilities to clean up contaminated areas and safely manage waste during response? Over the last 20 years, EPA research has been able to provide numerous solutions. For example, the research program developed contamination and waste management methods, and they were used to decontaminate personal protective equipment for healthcare workers in response to the Ebola virus contamination. The anthrax decontamination research results were also used to develop guidance for laboratory cleanup from potential anthrax contamination. We were also able to help the Japanese government clean up contamination from the Fukushima nuclear power plant incident in 2011. Our tools, methods, and data have been used to respond to a variety of incidents over the last 20 years, and we continue to build on this foundation of knowledge in partnership with DHS, S&T, and others. Back to you, Kim.
Great, thank you. Rachel, from the DHS perspective, what are the impacts of the research investments today?
Thanks, Kim. Great question. The research which S&T conducts in the chemical arena allows the nation to understand the dual nature of these materials, which materials could be used to harm us and where, and how to best protect, detect, and mitigate those events, while recognizing that many of these same chemicals provide the foundation for our way of life. The research helps to understand those nuances and to prioritize and balance the policy and the response.
So the research and investments that we're making today lay the groundwork for a more resilient future. They prepare us to respond to the threats that we're likely to encounter, whether they're intentional or natural. And they help us begin to plan for biodetection systems, for medical countermeasures, vaccines, and therapeutics that take many years to produce, most times many years to produce in order to have them ready when those events happen. Back to you, Kim.
Great, thank you. So our time is almost up. In the couple of minutes remaining, I have a final lightning round question and need brief 1 to 2 sentence responses. I'd like you to end on why this research matters. What is the value to the country in enhancing security and resilience? Let's start with Herb.
Thanks, Kim. So we need novel approaches to known threats as well as to novel threats, such as SARS-CoV-2. Whether it be a threat to human health or a threat to a critical sector like food and agriculture sector, these novel approaches are often founded and validated in the research community. The investments we make today will help us to timely inform policy and take actions to save lives and enable our state, local, tribal, and territorial partners to help protect the homeland and be a good partner to reduce risk and save lives around the world. Thanks, Kim. Back to you.
Great. And to Sang-Dong?
Yeah, research is a critical investment for our country to be prepared for any incidents that may never happen, but if they do, they will have enormous consequence to our lives and future, such as the current pandemic or nuclear incidents or any other chemical or biological incidents. So it is very important to be prepared for such incidents and disasters. The information, methods, tools, and technologies tested and developed by the researchers are the essential information for responders and decision makers to act timely, to respond to and recover from these incidents. So these expertise and capabilities will also prepare our communities to effectively manage the unknown or any emerging threats. Thank you. Back to you, Kim.
Great, thank you. And over to Rachel.
Thank you, Kim. To sum up, we're working to ensure that a chemical 9/11 doesn't happen, to understand what that could look like, what to do to stop it, and if it happens, how to minimize the harm to our country. That only happens with careful and focused research to understand those threats. Thanks.
So, yeah, hazard characterization research takes time, and the time to understand threats is before they happen. So now is the time to invest and to begin to understand the threats that the United States is going to face in the future. Thanks, Kim.
Great, thank you. And thank you to everyone. I wish we had more time. This was very informative. This conversation drives home why S&T's whole of government research approach matters to saving lives. We have a follow-up slide for you to learn more about research impacts to address chemical and biological threats in our R&D Showcase program. On behalf of Rachel Gooding at CSAC, Dr. Lloyd Huff at S&T, Dr. Sang-Dong Lee at EPA, and my colleague, Dr. Herb Wolf at CWMD, I am Kim Robinson. Thank you again for joining S&T's Whole of Government R&D Showcase.